Hey everyone, Richard from Digital Foundry here, and this is a first look at Gears of War 4 running on Xbox One X. Now this is a native 4K presentation and it's also utilizing HDR, so if you've got access to relevant equipment that can actually run HDR content from YouTube, and that is specifically a certain range of Samsung TVs, if you stream this video via Chromecast Ultra to an HDR screen you will get HDR. And there's a range of smartphones including Galaxy S8, LG V30, etc, that can run HDR content from the YouTube app. And otherwise, well, chances are if you're a normal YouTube user, you'll just be getting a tone mapped image. This is where YouTube converts the HDR image back to SDR, so it's a winner for everyone regardless of their screen. Okay, so let's talk about the game. Joining me to talk about it, Tom Morgan.
Hello there.
Bit of an extended intro there, but I think it was required to sort of understand that, you know, not everyone is actually going to see an HDR picture here.
No, that's totally fair enough. I mean, from what I've played of the game so far, and this is my first time playing it properly on Xbox One X, it's been a delight, and I can say for sure this has been a showcase for HDR. There's a couple of points we're going to cover, you know, the usual resolution and frame rate stuff, but I think it's worth emphasizing that the content of the game, the way it's designed stylistically, really does lend itself to what HDR is all about. Those peak brights, the deep blacks contrast with the whites. It is a real looker, and to help you along with that, the Coalition has included this split screen view between HDR and an SDR mode, which I'll show in a second. It really does highlight, if you are seeing this on a HDR display, just what an impact that makes. And looking back at what we were using with SDR, I wouldn't really want to go back to what we had before.
The other thing to bear in mind, of course, is that there are a lot of HDR screens out there that don't actually properly resolve HDR. So that split screen is going to be fascinating for people actually watching this video, or indeed playing this game on one of these ill-equipped HDR screens, because chances are you're not actually going to see much of a difference there.
Okay, so let's use this split screen view. You know, I just panned around this scene a bit just to give an idea. The bright whites on the mountaintops really show it off well. Then there's stuff like explosions, all the usual visual elements that produce bright lights. Yeah, it's just a very cool option. I'm sure you wouldn't want to play for too long with this mode selected, but it is there just to show off, you know, to friends what your HDR enabled TV can do. You know, it's great we've got a game that packs in both this HDR and at 4K as well. But yes, shall we talk about resolution?
Yeah, so basically Gears of War 4 operates with two distinct modes. So yes, we get essentially a 4K version of the original game, which runs at a locked 30 frames per second, just like the original game. Difference being 4K resolution, 4K assets. Now, I actually had to download a 28 gig patch from my original Gears 4 install to get all of this new loveliness, and the game I think stands at something like 109 gigabytes now.
It's got to be the largest game I've downloaded on any console.
It's absolutely insane, but you are getting 4K textures, which were previously, I believe, only available on the PC version. Now these are available to console users too. So yes, you get an enhanced 4K presentation, 2160p confirmed. Details of the rendering specifics I think we'll leave to John for his analysis.
I think that does show the difference between Microsoft's approach to supported games and what we get on PS4 Pro. You know, the fact the patch actually added a lot more in terms of the sheer weight of the file.
Yeah, I mean, after all, Xbox One X does have an additional 4 gigs of RAM, and there's only a very small memory bump available to developers on PlayStation 4 Pro. So yeah, I guess it is great that the memory is actually being used in this title. But to return to what we were talking about earlier, in addition to the 4K 30 mode, there is, of course, the performance mode.
From what I've pixel counted, it is running at a straight 1920 by 1080, quarter of the pixel output of that 4K mode. The big advantage, obviously, is that it's targeting 60 frames per second. I suppose now's as good a time as any to switch over and show the performance side of things. Shall we start with 4K 30? These are some stress test areas from the prologue leading up to the raid. I think this is some of the most intensive parts of the game. What we're getting is really a very dull 30 FPS line. There's not much to say about it at all.
Yeah, it's completely locked, just like the Xbox One version of the game. Now, that did actually use dynamic resolution scaling, but it's using Unreal Engine 4's temporal anti-aliasing, which means it's actually really difficult to see any reduction in pixel count if it does occur, and I'm not sure it does here.
No, I took some screens, and what you get is a exact match for the frame outputted from the console. So yeah, it is native 4K as far as I can tell, and there is some temporal stuff. There is a motion blur effect which can make it difficult to pick out what's going on. Yeah, we'll look into that in more detail with the full analysis down the line, but 4K 30 from what I can see, and no drops, which is fantastic.
I think it's going to be interesting to see the extent to which this compares with the full-fat PC version running at 4K, so this is going to be a job for John when he gets back from vacation.
Okay, so next up, let's go for the performance mode, which is 1080p 60 or targeting that. Very keen to stress targeting 60 FPS, and you can see why. This is from Act 2, and what you're getting are some dips. That's fair to say about 50 FPS in this scene. Generally it's 60 FPS, but it can go lower than that, and it does reveal the adaptive VSync in play as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. What's happening there is that there's tearing, but only at the very top of the screen, so you won't really notice it, but basically it gives the developer a bit of extra time to render a frame before scanning it out to the screen. Usually you'd wait for VSync for that, but that can introduce extra stutter, giving a bit of extra leeway there, flipping the frame buffer later. That does result in decreased latency, so you're getting to see an image sort of sooner. But yeah, I mean, it's not a locked 60, and there can be some issues. I mean, I'm looking at this clip now, and it's starting to buckle.
John did advise, being the person who's played this game all the way through, these kind of stress test areas in the game. So yeah, this is one of the worst areas I've found. Just for reference, this is probably about as bad as it gets, hitting the 40s with a lot of tearing, but again, as you say, that tearing is just at the top of the screen, so not really an issue for image quality as such, but you do feel those drops as you go through it. It does start to feel a bit stuttery.
Yeah, so I'm going to be quite fascinated to try out this title on a FreeSync screen, because typically the adaptive sync effect works on most monitors, certainly the 4K ones, between 40 to 60 frames per second. So that seems to be well within the window that we've got here, so that would eliminate the tearing, and those stutters would be far less pronounced. So this is actually going to be a great test case for FreeSync support when we give it a go.
But we've got to give it credit. This game is running at 60 most of the time, and you know what? The one area where I thought it would be dropping pretty heavily, the boss at the end of Act 4, actually turned out to be running at a perfect 60. There's a lot going on here. It just didn't buckle at all. So kudos to the coalition for that. It really is these sort of edge cases which show these drops.
That boss is actually interesting because I'm using that to measure power draw from the console. And I'm measuring a mere 125 watts from the machine in performance mode, which is interesting. It's about on par, maybe slightly higher than the base Xbox One running the same content at 30. However, if you switch to the 4K mode, that power consumption ramps up to 175 watts. That's a 50 watt differential. So from my perspective, it seems to me that even though we're getting performance drops here, we are actually not pushing the system at all in the performance mode. The power draw is much lower. So gut feeling here, possibly it's the CPU that's the limiting factor there as opposed to the GPU. The GPU, of course, is the main power draw on the system.
So that about wraps it up, I think. Beautiful 4K HDR game. Did we have anything else to add on top of that?
Yeah, I just think we should wait for John's analysis on this one because he is the Gears of War master. We just wanted to show you some footage of how the game looked at 4K in HDR on the embargo day, so this is the earliest possible time that we can show you this particular video. And of course, if you want to see this video the way it was meant to be seen, if you want to see the full HDR effect, I would recommend supporting our Patreon. Go to digitalfoundry.net, download the file there, stick it on a USB stick, plug it into your TV, and away you go. You're in for a visual treat, I can assure you. But, well, I think we're going to leave it there, Tom.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So if you did enjoy this early analysis and want to see more Xbox One X content, please do like and subscribe to our channel. And of course, as Rich says, we've got that Digital Foundry Patreon for the source file for this video. But until next time, thanks for watching.
Get over there and clear it out! Grappling hook! Come on, man! Knock him down!